organization pretty much focused on using data to drive intelligence in healthcare, using data to drive mobility of healthcare around patients, and providing a patient-centric approach to making sure everybody has access to their health data as part of a culture. And ultimately building personalized AI solutions that support both people and also organizations in that journey. So data has been our biggest moat from 2020 when we first started the healthcare business, trying to explain to people the value of data in healthcare and being one of the most critical things, especially in this continent, that we can use to reduce the cost of healthcare, to provide better service, and also to really maximize the access points as we provide healthcare across both rural and urban communities for our population. And also with the AI Center of Excellence, basically, we are an organization that builds capacity in artificial intelligence from enterprise organizations to young people across different sectors, from healthcare to insurance to services, even across energy. And we develop service solutions for clients, mostly global and Pan-African clients across different markets. And we also have specific IPs that we launch into the market as well. So thank you very much. And the theme for today really is about AI in healthcare. And, we all keep hearing about AI in healthcare. AI is going to do all this stuff. And a lot of, rooms that we go into is really to also have honest conversations about the reality. We know that AI is not going anywhere. It's here. The Pandora's box is open. So that's not the debate, or what it's going to do. That's not the debate, but the reality of what it will do, how it's going to do that, and also from our reality as Africans as well, to remove the wishful thinking and get into a position of understanding what is possible, what is not, and what we need to do some of the things that we actually want to do. But more importantly, to really understand the industry that is artificial intelligence. It's not a tool, it's an industry that is driving consistent economic growth across different sectors, and is powered and fueled by massive financial power. So that's really the objective of today's conversation from my perspective.
All right, thank you very much, John, and thank you for that quick introduction. I'm not sure if we have the other panelists now, Taka or Philbert has joined the call. If they have, please can we quickly have introductions from Taka and then Philbert. Taka, please go ahead. All right, so while we wait for them to join, I'm just going to go on with John. John, are you able to come on video? Looks like it's just you and I to get started.
Yeah, that's
All
fine.
right,
I'm here.
amazing. All right, so I know you laid the foundation for AI in healthcare, and I think there's a whole number of practitioners here who are already doing a lot of stuff in AI and healthcare. And one thing I've realized is that Africa sits at the receiving end of all of AI products, whether product built. Oh, you're welcome, Tucker. We were expecting you, but now that you're here, we just pause and let you introduce yourself, and then we go into the conversation. Can you hear me? Oh, I think Taka is probably managing an audio issue. I can't hear you at all. You probably might want to check it again. Yeah, I can't hear you. So maybe you could try to fix the audio issue and then we can come back to you. So as I was saying, about AI and healthcare, we do have different contexts with which we're going to be looking at this conversation. One will be about the data context. And I just assume everyone here understands AI and the reason for AI and the so much hype and noise about AI. So we're not going to go back into the fundamentals. We're going to go into the construct that applies strictly to healthcare within the healthcare space from all across the different dimensions from patient care, clinical patient care to diagnostics to pharmaceuticals and all that. So those are the kind of conversations that we're going to drive straight into. One of the things that some of the lenses that we'll be looking at is looking at the data that we're using to power AI in healthcare. We'll be looking at infrastructure. We'll be looking at the right guidelines and all of that. So that's where I'm going to start from with John in this conversation. John, if you can come back up on video and then we can get started. With programs all across, oftentimes people try to do pilots, right? They try to do pilots because they want, in quote, what is called proof of concept or empirical evidence to show the possibility of scale. But with AI and healthcare, because of the peculiarity of it, of course, sanctity of life and duty of care and all that, how do we conceptualize the concept of pilots? You see a lot of pilots all over the place with AI right now. But there's human life involved. Before now, folks would say, if you want to introduce anything into the healthcare delivery system, like either infrastructure, diagnostics, or drugs and stuff, you do either clinical trials or you do, diagnostic testing, with non-human subjects and all that. But with AI now, everybody just moves it to the hospital. Whether it's conversational healthcare AI or diagnostics or medical records, everybody just moves it to the hospital and they call it pilots. How do we unpack this whole concept of pilots? And how do we really begin to find AI in healthcare use cases that's actually working for the people? And are they like examples from your own experience? And as you talk about this, it might be good to unpack a lot much more from your own experience. I'll let you get started with that, John.
Okay, cool. Thank you very much. I think a pilotosis, which is the phenomenon of having multiple pilots in any given country, is something all of us have suffered from over the last 10 years in the continent. The amount of money, over $37 billion, has been spent by aid agencies over the last 12, 13 years. And you ask yourself the question, where are we with all that money that has been spent over the last almost 15 years? We should have world-class health systems across Africa, from country to country. So, there's a debt of a lot of projects which have no value being real projects in the first place, being done as pilots. And I think that's the first thing to remove. A lot of those things is just there's no point in doing them at all because they didn't make any sense. Then when you come into artificial intelligence specifically, you understand that things like clinical trial, it's not really pilot testing. You're trying to identify if this particular drug or a particular line of treatment will work. And there's a lot of things that you have to worry about prior to running this type of food, prior to even drug discovery years ago, where it took a longer time. And, protein fold, alpha fold, new mineral, new molecular design that you can develop. AI can allow you to do error checks faster than you can ever do it with human computational intelligence, so that you can get from doing 5 errors in a day to almost 500,000 errors to figure out, okay, all the errors, because you're doing an elimination theory. You're eliminating all the possibilities so that you can actually get to a space where you say, this thing might actually work. Then you go trial it and come back again and see what. So the speed at which you can do that becomes faster. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're still not trialing it because you can't completely say yes. So it's just the speed. I've the speed that I'm able to do it has compressed from maybe 3-4 years to, and you see the FDA, I think almost over 1,000 different type of trial techniques and also AI models still at the FDA in the US, where they're trying to figure out, okay, by 2027, quite a bunch of them will be given licenses because they've been trialing them. So that's not going to change. But what changes is the speed at which we can compress the time. That's the number one thing. And they say because that speed goes back into the discovery of all these new drugs that we can do faster. Because and then the second part also is the speed at which we can extract intelligence out of what we have in hospitals and in health, in the healthcare space. So that speed again has considerably changed, which means the critical thinking or thinking approach is where the problem now lies. Is the approach of how you think about what it is that you actually want to do and how does it actually benefit not just society and state, but how does it benefit the external ecosystem, which obviously means is who's going to pay for it? Because you can do all this great stuff, which we do, and because we talk about healthcare as being the state issue, but technically is an issue of society and state, not just the state. Right? Because I always say if people can pay M-Pesa transaction, they should be able to pay for a little bit of money for healthcare. That's standard. Everyone pays for M-Pesa transaction, either they like it or not. So why can't they pay 50 bob for healthcare? And we assume. So in that process, the one thing that's very important is understanding today now, because artificial intelligence has compressed the ability for you to do things, is now being able to conceptualize those things that you want to do already a scalable frame before you even get started. See, before people would be like, well, just do the pilot to see what happens. No, I am really thinking that this thing is purely scalable. Then I am going to do a little version 0 or version 1 of it. Because it's not going to die because I've already thought about the scalability of it. So that's where artificial intelligence changes the game for you, because you can go from 0 to 3 to 6 months and you're able to get that thing done. So you're not spending $100 million, you're not spending $5 million, you spend a few hundred grand and you're able to actually achieve an optimal first objective.
Okay,
And
sorry,
again,
John.
the
I
cost
would just
of
I'll just interrupt you like as deemed necessary. Is that okay? Um, I wanted to just get
you
right the concept about speed with artificial intelligence, and also just opposing that with potential harm that AI can cause in healthcare, just so that we'll balance the conversations around speed and not like we're minimizing pilots, but I'll introduce rather model validation as a concept that should be emphasized in the use of AI in healthcare. So the speed that you reference here, how do you think um it should sit on model validation? Are we with introducing AI in healthcare um for unintended harm or side effects, whatever they might call it, or exclusion of certain population, or errors that are, some of them are being documented right now in even in the use of AI in healthcare. What should be the role of model validation as against pilots, and how should that be approached before scale? How do we really get it to real life use or real life impact?
Okay, so again, the question you're asking, there are sequences of those questions. So I come from artificial intelligence from an engineering perspective. Okay, pure. And when you think about what you're doing about model validation, it's the same thing that you're basically saying you're piloting you. And the proof that it actually works at the end of the day is in the doing in a live environment. No matter how much you do it in the lab and it looks great. Until you go into a live environment, so the thing is you control. It's now in a controlled live environment. That is you turn pilot around, you say model validation. You're controlling the live environment so that you can actually say, okay, in this live environment, I would like to contain any negative thing that could happen, because I still don't know. As much as I believe that I'm 100% accurate and I test it and I see it. So I think model validation, definitely with artificial intelligence, is something that you hard code into your design. Yeah, and this is, a lot of the lectures that I give, and part of the theory, which is not a practice, not as a policy. because so the science of it, you have to understand the scientific formula of this thing. So the science of it becomes extremely important if you're actually going to validate that model, and if you're going to monitor the drift of the model, and if you're going to understand the quality of degradation over time. So the science, there's a scientific analysis where monitoring itself of those models that you put into hospital, because any negative thing that happens, the ripple effect is much more than if you put it in other sectors. Not as bad. So that is the safety as a science clause is one of the most significant things we have to look at in healthcare. We have policies around safety in AI. But the same person who's who is talking about the policy does not understand the science of how to actually monitor these models themselves. I'm sure you've heard a lot of things that models are doing lately themselves. So you need to scientifically, it's like you have a child and you just leave the child to walk around because they're growing up. And as they grow up, they pick up other things from other people. They pick up other things from society, then they react to it. So the mother has to keep walking to the child, but has to understand the science of watching the child, not just saying, don't do this. So they bring out a stick and they beat the child from time to time, right? I'm just giving you an example. In
Yeah.
Africa, if you quantify reality. So that's, over the last 15 years working in artificial intelligence, that is the objective today. And especially in healthcare, safety as a science, where you build these models with a clear understanding of hard coding safety inside what you build, because you're still not completely 1,000% sure. But yes, we know the most significant breakthrough for artificial intelligence, one of it is healthcare, without argument. So that will be my philosophy. So what I do, over the last 2 years, I took a specific space which is around data. And because that's the space that I always interested me when I started healthcare about 6 years ago, was how do you use data to drive intelligence in healthcare institutions? So build an artificial intelligence network that I can basically, because one of the biggest problems in healthcare, in hospitals and everywhere that I've been to across the continent, is the fragmented nature of structured and unstructured data that comes from healthcare institutions. And in that piece of all that data lies the real IP of the institution, the real knowledge that we can even use to do so many different things. But people don't read, and especially the metadata, tiny little things that you don't think about, because we think about what we call the primary data, the disease. You have malaria. I don't care that you have malaria. I care about the tiny little symptoms that actually design what malaria looks like. And those are the things, what you call those metadata. Those are the things that you factor together with your environment, with your lifestyle, and you start seeing the world from a different perspective. So we, designed this intelligence platform, which, again, we tested it out to see, okay, can it by design begin to become more intelligent to understand the institution that is inside and begin to help that institution navigate so many things that the institution can't see with your traditional systems. And how
All right.
would that
Excellent.
work? And how would it also help the institution do that? And we deploy that to a few institutions right now rather than a pilot, because we build it for scale and it's actually working. So that's a live example of something that it's taking 2 years, but the purpose was very clear on day one.
All right. Thank you. I think there's a question, Mark Rekin. I'll come back to the questions from the audience later on. And if you do have questions, please look for the Q&A, box on your screen, and then send in your questions in that. Now that you've got into data, I do have quite some questions and about the data construct itself. There's a recent analysis on medical imaging AI challenges, and basically this data set and benchmarks for this medical imaging AI was said to have had 70% of the data from the US, 16% from China, 13% from Germany, and about I think 10% from Netherlands and the UK, and only 1% of this data came from Africa. And knowing that Africa do have like the greatest human genetic diversity on the continent, without going into some more localized examples of how changes in algorithm with the data, and also how issues around pattern genetics and all that can differ with different regions of the world in terms of the data, especially healthcare data. A lot of these data sets are being trained from Europe, the US, and Asia. What happens when we apply these models to African patients? Like we may have like different disease patterns, different genetic variations, and all that. How do we get to really know that this AI can be reliable for the African context? And in your experience, how have you had to manage those, and how have you had to, diversify from those? Are they frontier models that are locally engineered and trained and built, or how have you been able to manage and deploy that within the healthcare ecosystem on the continent? And if you do have questions, I see a number of people already dropping their questions. Please drop them. We're going to get to that. And I can add another question to that for you, John, if you don't mind, since we only have you right now. Um, there's also the issue around with the significant large amount of data and control of those data sets that are being drawn and used from these models, right? How do we then begin to draw the lines on patient data sovereignty, ownership of the data by their respective patients, patient data privacy, and also like what's the trade-off in the benefits that they get from using AI to achieve faster diagnosis, and also the privacy or sovereignty of the patient and ownership of the patient over their data.
Cool. Thank you very much.
And if questions are too much for a round, we can split it.
No,
But please go
it's okay.
ahead.
It's okay.
Yeah, but before you go on, do we have Philbert now joined, or Taka, have you been able to resolve the challenges you were having with the audio? Taka, if you can, okay, are you there? Okay. Oh no, I'm so sorry. Can you hear John? I can see you, we can see you, but I can hear you.
I can't hear that either.
I apologize you're having troubles, Taka. Um, if you could please log off and try and log in again and then try to join us back. We still want to hear from you. Thank you very much. Yeah. Go ahead, John.
I think, data is a financial asset today. And I'm going to start from there.
Absolutely.
Data is an asset, financial asset. And I think everyone on this call should think about what I just said. And when something becomes a financial asset, it becomes very, very profitable. And also it becomes very, very much in demand. And then there's also the understanding of the various layers of data that is actually required to define the level of financial value your data is actually worth. Okay, so people, when you say data, you run classes for a student and you say, what is data to you? They say, well, data is any type of information that you can be used to anything. But if you then go back to how you, do labeling for building artificial intelligence model, you use metadata, right? You use tiny pieces of data, you combine them together, and then you create an output and you allow it to train up the output, right? But each one, because there could be multiple scenarios for one piece of data string set. So if I say 11,674 John, it could mean anything. But if I say John 611,77, it could mean anything. And each one of those things has multiple layers of scenarios. But when I put an output to it, so I train the thing. So the way we collect data, or the way we understand collecting data in our healthcare institution, first of all, it's not very good. We look at data as just a transient use of information to just understand what is happening to a patient. That is layer one, fantastic. But the same piece of data is also actually important to actually understand what could happen to everyone, and also what could happen to the person next, and what could be happening to be. So you can start putting different strings if you really design collecting data as a core principle of digital transformation, or even building systems, because we build systems and we think about data secondary. So the problem you highlighted with the data sets that all these models are trained on, it's definitely comes with a bias. There's There is no question about it. And I've seen it happen to me in real time. It comes with a bias because what is being trained on is design of what is going to output over time. So, and for us to complain about that, I think that is a wrong concept. And I've said this for years that, complaining about something someone built with a lot of their money designed for a certain thing, the same way everyone used to sell software to us from all over the world. They design the software they wanted, and then they sell it to us. Have you ever seen how many African companies have ever sold software to any other person, any other part of the world? I mean, if you may have put the name in the chat for me. So if this game is about money, $2.6 trillion into AI in the last 3 years alone, going into almost $8 trillion. I'm not understanding why people think anyone cares about what you think. I'm not getting it. And I keep having these lectures with people. I don't get why you think anyone who's spending that amount of money cares about what you think. Yes, they might tell you so. They might pretend and do all this great stuff. But at the end of the philosophy is the same. It's the philosophy of money. So the industry of artificial intelligence is what people need to understand, because the data is a critical part of that industry, which means that that data will only be used for the biases where the most money is generated. Money is not generated in Africa. You don't pay enough into the healthcare pool. It's like 2.5% you pay into the entire healthcare pool. You're not that important until you make yourself important. You understand? So they can't train on well, even when they take your data to train, it's more for a market that actually has more value at the end of the day. So the biases will remain the same because the economics doesn't make sense. And yes, taking your data is to see if there's a real market quantifiable value for you. Then the second part of your question, which is around sovereignty and training this data set. Listen, the Chinese have taught us something.
Before you go into the second question, that your point right now is really, really damning. Because you're saying that one, we don't even have the data to drive the value. And that's something.
That's not what I said. I said we have data in all sorts. We have a lot of it. Okay. But how we thought about data for years doesn't lend itself to the best quality of data to do the things that we want to do.
Yeah.
But we have so much. But then my second question will help you see what we can now do with this much.
So someone has a question that's related to, and I just want to take these questions as we go on.
Please do.
And someone did ask about they're like a developer who does, development within the healthcare space, and they're curious. They like to use local data, rather than public data studies from the US or elsewhere. How can we move to overcoming this challenge of data scarcity, data quality, structured data sets? Those are like challenges that
there's scarcity. I'm not understanding where people get this information from. There's what is scarcity? I'm producing data, me and you, as we're having this conversation.
It's not available to everybody, John. That's what they're saying.
It doesn't necessarily mean it's scarce. When there's fuel scarcity, does it mean fuel is scarce? It's just people are hoarding the fuel.
Yeah.
So that someone else can pay them more money for it. Or there's no scarcity of data.
Okay, maybe we should have said data hoarding is the problem, not scarcity.
People are hoarding, and sometimes people don't understand why, and they have no frameworks to actually really share this data, because a lot of the frameworks that we took is things that were superimposed on us. So someone gets into a position where, and then they just look at the law, and then they say, we're just going to continue this way. They don't think, okay, because you don't think about the asset value that you have. Finance, the asset value, the data, that's a massive asset. How do I trade with it? What do I do with it? How do I use it to design an ecosystem that supports continuity of localized development, right? So, and that also requires a different type of scientific understanding post the policy. Post the policy, it requires a different type of scientific understanding of about, even when you're moving data around, what is the metadata framework that you're actually designing scientifically to actually make sure that metadata is consumable? And what are the extensions that you build into to allow for other people to use that data, but also to recontribute in that data? Right? So I don't think it's a question of scarcity to the gentleman or woman who asked the question. It's just a question of design principles. How we design our ecosystem and how we understand data, and most of how we understand the possibility for ourselves. Because we should be able to, I mean, a hospital, for example, developers can partner with hospitals. Hospitals have research departments. Lots of hospitals in the US have research teams. And those research teams, research departments, they partner with private sector companies. And together they build this amazing stuff. How many hospitals in Africa partner with private sector people to build amazing stuff in research? Forget government first. Just because they don't understand. The leaders of the hospital don't understand. So when someone doesn't understand something, the first thing they do is stop everything. They say, oh, well, let's go to the law. Even the law itself, the Data Protection Act, even the Healthcare Protection Act, if you look at it intrinsically, you'd find that by design, it didn't lend itself to looking at the asset value that is data. So to train these models, the Chinese have taught us something that is possible to not have billions of dollars and actually still design amazing models, right? With the open weight, I mean, open weight has, you know, I was looking at the research 2 days ago. We're almost at 100 to 80 in less than a year, what the Chinese have done with a minimal amount of money. And why, which comes back to the first thing I said, is the value of qualitative against quantitative human capital. Qualitative human capital means that you have a lot of people in a quantity economy that have skill set, diverse, that can contribute to an invention. Quantitative human capital overload means you usually just have a lot of people who can consume stuff. So, you know, so the bottom line of this, starting from healthcare, is quality of human capital, education, educating people in understanding the possibilities of what they can do and how to do those things. So the opportunity for us to look at what the Chinese have done and say we can actually build models, or we can retrain these models ourselves with our own data set, so that we don't have, you know, models that have the same biases. And which obviously means there's a financial element to it. How do we look at the value for us to finance it? So you know, you can't say to someone who, again, you know, when I was 2 weeks ago, I was at the global conference and I was speaking to everyone. You can't say to me, when I spend $2 trillion of my money doing something, that you're important. I'm trying to understand, how are you important to me? I'm not saying we're not, it's just a question. It's an honest question. We have an honest conversation, right? That's what this webinar is about.
Yeah, so I do get your point, John. I just that you were going to touch on the next point around the ownership and the governance of it.
So the governance is extremely important, because the governance, every hospital, every organization must have a strong governance for data. And because that governance also helps with transparency, trustworthiness, and it also helps with the ethics of how you actually look at the data. So which means the one-to-one and the one-to-many, between you and one citizen, and then between you and multiple citizens. And governance also, because if you have to look at both the one-to-one and one-to-many. Because one-to-many means the governance doesn't exclude protection of states around the data, because that's how pandemics happen. In pandemics, we have to share data, right? So that is one. And then one-to-one is, how do you protect one citizen to make sure that their data governance structure is protected and they're not taken advantage of? But then the second question is, even in that same governance structure, if you figure out a way, how do we actually help people get value of the data that they're producing?
Yeah. There's some questions still related to the point that you're making around, and I do hear you on this concept around the value that we place on the data. However, in using this data, and then the concept of AI and healthcare, there have been a few reported incidents of how AI is created, or the introduction of AI has created adverse effect on clients. And there's still opportunity to, you know, go back to some of these conversations you already, highlighted before. But there is a big question from Katrina Prentice, who is saying, what exactly should we be focusing on? Um, what are like the big barriers to moving AI from hype to real impact? Should we be focused more on regulation? And I think data protection, you've talked a lot about data protection. Should we be looking at procurement as a big component that we want to make sure that is rightly guided, the right risk and procurement risk frameworks, the right guardrails are in place? Or should we be looking at funding or trust in the clinical processes that allows AI? So those are some of the questions that Katrina had asked, and I'll let you start with that. But Natalie is also trying to find out if there are any mandatory incident reporting systems for AI in healthcare incidents that exist on the continent, and from your own experience, what's simply saying, how do we get to like an adverse event equivalent or a pharmacovigilance equivalent, so that you've talked about safety by design, so that safety does not mean someone has to come and complain or there has to be a news story. What are like the incident reporting systems or the risk valves that do exist in using AI in healthcare? So if you can go with the two rounds of questions.
I'll start with the last one first. I think, there's something we call eval systems in AI, evaluation metrics, how you evaluate the models. And then also there's a lot of understanding of the type of models that you want to use and what those models themselves can do for you and how you retrain them. But also there's, recursive improvement where, you're also trying to, when you think about autonomous model design, where you want the model to improve himself by design and then improve the next model that is built, right? So when you take that and it's a mathematical formula, then you ask the question is how do you monitor? So one of the things I believe, and this is my personal thought and a project that I'm working on, is that transparency is a critical way to help the first layer of monitoring, right? Because sometimes you don't understand this technology. There's a lot of things that is happening that even you, the most experienced scientist, somebody in another country is just redesigned something else because you can go into so many axes with AI at the minute. The Pandora's box is open. So both good and bad people are just having a field day. Okay. So the first thing is from a regulatory perspective, especially in healthcare, is making sure that people are able to explain how they got to that model.
Explainability.
So, and you have to explain it and put it here for the regulator to understand. So it's almost like having this regulatory platform where you explain and also how you actually monitor your models and what is the outcome that you expect. That means you have to think a lot for you to be able to do that. Then two, we have to train the regulators, and there have to be more technical people who can actually do that monitoring. Because today most of them don't have people who can do that stuff. So which then falls back into education. And I just keep saying the same thing. It's educate, educate people about this new nuance that has just hit us by design. So if you're able to do that, you might cut out 60% of the problem, not the entire problem. Because now I have to think, that hospital, that organization who's building stuff, they truly have engineers by design don't think a lot about transparency and ethics. They don't. So and the problem is we don't have a lot of AI architects in Africa, people who truly understand architecture. We have a lot of people who can build stuff, but not architecture. And that's the difference. To invent something, you need architects. You can't build a house without an architect. And all the beautiful houses you see, someone architected them in their brain. and then the construction people who are like engineers built it. If the architect can't see it, you can't build it. So there's not enough architects in the continent who can see things that people can't see regularly. So, which means that transparency is a really, really important part. So, creating a way that people who build models, who develop these things, have to explain, have to document, and have to domicile it somewhere. And then being able to build simple models that investigate that regularly and then over time. So you're not trying to stop innovation. Super, super important. You're just saying innovation and safety should live on the same house. It's okay. Safety by design, and you keep innovating, but you just make sure that you tell us how you got to this thing. So we don't want to stop you. So we can also test it ourselves. So which also means we need, so that is the easiest thing. And then the second part is, really truly learning how to build safety agents inside the agent networks that you built. So that's my answer to that first question. I hope it helps. But we can talk a lot more. The first one, data, really optimizing the value of our data for federated intelligence is one of the very first things we should do very well. Across borders, even in a country, Ministry of Health, Ministry of Agriculture, Ministry of Climate, combine, sit together, have a meeting around all the data sets, because there is a theory, the theory of one human being. It's only one human being who produces all this data across every ecosystem. I am the one that consumes finance. I'm the one that engages with the climate. I am the one that engages with it. I am the one. It's just me, human being, one human being. So Einstein, the theory of one human being. So if you go back to those fundamentals and say it is the same person that all of you are managing. It's not 5 different people. It's the same person in multiplicity. So how do you begin to see how that data set created by that one person across all these different ministries, even starting with the first 3 who are the most significant: health, climate, and agriculture? How do you combine to begin to see, okay, what is it that we can learn, and how do we use this express data to allow our developers, our people, build stuff that can help our societies, right? I think that is the first thing, unleashing the data sets that we have locally. Even without a lot of money, we'll be able to achieve some significant things, because you can get extremely creative how you use the limited resources you have. And then 2, educate more people in sciences, in mathematics, and in understanding engineering of artificial intelligence. We are really driving everyone else to data sciences. That's great. But that's not the only skill set required in this new world that we live in. We need a lot more AI ethics officers. We need, so there's new different roles that are coming up. So retrain the institution so that they can produce better people across multiple different genres that can support healthcare. Every doctor should have an AI training, just by law. Every doctor, every nurse, just law. If you don't, you shouldn't practice. It's just because that is just the world, because it'll change your thinking about how you also metamorphosize data sets. Then finance, because we already have the regulation. We're doing all of us, every African country has a policy, regulation, what, this, that, the implementation plan, it's all there. But ask me 2, 3 years from now, if you don't understand the industry that is AI, because if we did understand the industry, with all the mineral resources we had, we would have found ways to put money into 4 or 5 years ago into designing factories that actually produce part of the hardware that's used for AI today. Right? So so I think that's my answer to you. I think go first. What I would do first, data. Use the biggest asset that I have as a value driver. 2, educate everyone, especially in healthcare, properly. And then find a different layer of finance.
Yeah. So I think I'm just going to take you on the finance part. There's someone who already had a question on financing, but I think for me, there's still the big elephant, which is financing. ODAs have dropped drastically. across countries. Countries are barely meeting their national budget target for health across the continent. But one of the things that, you know, model developers, innovators who are currently deploying AI in health, according to the economic evaluation of medical AI, most of the costs are basically operational costs. And for especially for Africa deployments, there's mostly costs around training the models, maintaining the models. I do that. Like I do that right now. I know how many times we have to upgrade GPU sizes and stuff for models to run and do scalable implementation of GPUs. And that's quite some cost. You keep paying Google, paying Amazon and all that. And sometimes the return on investment for this is not yet quite documented, or it seems to take a long time to get to. Now you run a similar business, and one of the things that I'll be interested, and one of the participants in the audience wanted to know is what is the best business model to survive introducing, you know, cost-driven models like AI models that would, one, better healthcare outcomes, you know, create efficient process or pathways to achieving healthcare outcomes, help clinical decision making, and tax shifting for healthcare workers, reduce the burden of the workload and all that. There's so many advantages and benefits that are being documented and identified. But what should a business model look like for a sustainable African health AI business? Knowing that we have a culture of government being mostly responsible for healthcare in Africa, even if out of pocket is still the largest way to, but there's a culture of waiting for government to do healthcare, as against other sectors or other civic utilities. So who should be paying for these things? Is it the patient? Is it the hospital? Is it the government? Is it the health insurance models? How should be the model, the business of AI and healthcare be approached from the perspective of someone who is either an innovator or an investor or even the government themselves, without losing on the potential benefits to the people in terms of improved health outcomes. Over to you, John.
Okay,
And
that's a
sorry, just
loaded
before you
question.
go, I just want to quickly check in if we have Taka now with our audio fixed, and if we have Philbert joined. We've been waiting for them and we're beginning to wrap up shortly. Apologies that we've not had them yet. I'm sure they must have been held back. Our feedback must have been held back by emergent conflict. But we'll allow John continue. I think I'll just go after this round. I'll go to the questions, the remaining questions in the chat. And if you have any more questions, I see much more questions for you in the chat, John. If you have any much more questions, please drop them in the chat, because the last round will be taking questions from the Q&A in the chat. Go ahead, John.
Thank you very much. So I think, again, the question is, who's the buyer, first of all? And you really have to articulate that question so well in this new world that we're living in. Who is the buyer? Who is buying what, right? And is the buyer well informed enough about the possibility of what this scheme can do for them to make more money or to improve their revenue? And then the last part is also the regulatory framework that allows the buyer to feel confident enough to do that. So I'll give you some statistics. In the North American market, 7 out of every 10 CEO of a health institution is well aware of the value of AI in healthcare. In Africa, do you know the number?
We don't have the data yet.
Well, there's a couple of numbers that some people have done. It's 0.7. The 0.7 is always, they try to get it to 1 out of 10. Right? 8 out of every 10 healthcare leader in Asian market have gone through a strong healthcare education knowledge in AI. right? And I keep going back to education, and education doesn't just mean school. It's also enterprise knowledge, right? Enterprise knowledge is not about how to use ChatGPT or chat. No, no, no. Enterprise knowledge of the business of AI in my business. What is it? Because that, first of all, means I'm able to understand, I can consume this thing. Because if you think about it from a technology player, you miss the point. It is a business that is disrupting your business completely or can reharmonize. So as a leader of a business, you don't leave your business or technology people do. You understand it, you design it, and then you're part of the execution, right? With your people. So, and that affects us downstream. And why I'm talking about that upstream here is if that upstream is not clear the value, we can do all this great stuff we want to do. It becomes very difficult. And this is my experience to actually, sell that thing upstream to that person to say, well, you should buy this model because it's great. It's like fantastic, but I'm not getting it. So that's number one. Then when you think about, the effect of how much money you want to spend in this industry, and I keep referring back to my first reference. This is an industry of money. That is what is driving this industry today. So, which means all your hyperscalers, everyone is out to make money. So, the question is, what is the value or what are the new things that we should be doing to be able to reduce that cost significantly in regards to how we actually deploy AI solutions into these institutions? Number two. And then the last part, and there's a number of things that you're doing. So about a year ago, I was talking a lot about, I was at Oxford giving a lecture, and I was talking about distributed edge compute network, right? Built on distributed models. And I remember finishing that lecture. It was a bunch of, it was about 90 people, a lot of African. It was only the Asians who came to me and they're like, oh my God, we get what you're saying in terms of distributed edge compute network, because you can actually use it at the edge of the infrastructure, but you can create distributed mesh at the top stream. And you don't necessarily need to use hyperscalers anymore, right? So today we're now in what we're doing. So I think the objective is to see that finance itself, to make money out of what we're doing today, it's a process, and we're going to have to really push through the education model to help our leaders understand the true value of AI in what we're about to do and why they should do it. Then you start seeing, and then there's a lot of collaboration that needs to happen between different institutions. And I let Phil talk about collaboration now that he's here.
Yeah, thank you. I think the education model that you just got to is some question that I know that Phil would continue with, because there's a question on the chat that says, how can Africa really build a skilled AI and data science workforce for health systems that are affordable, context appropriate, and what kind of skills should we be looking at? And I think that's something that I'll say Phil start with, but there's also the issues around the healthcare workers, healthcare professionals who, coming from the traditional standpoint, um, a lot of healthcare workers have been sold this concept anecdotally to say AI is going to replace some of the things that they do. So there is the issue of trust. Do they trust AI enough to want to use it, or are we um how are we balancing the right trust in AI from healthcare workers who already have a fear of certain levels of replacement with AI? So how do we build that trust, and how do we also deliberately grow capacity? See, this is not a conversation we should be having in 1 hour. Obviously, there's a lot to unpack, and that's why I'll just let Phil, begin to wind us down with those questions. Thank you very much, John. I think it's been very deep insight. I've been following the charts and the Q&A, and I see all those feedback about how insightful this is coming through for a lot of people. Over to you, Jean. Phil Bed.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kunle. A great pleasure being here, John. Before the webinar ends, I will just briefly introduce myself and then pick up on the last few questions. because I'm mindful of the time. So my name is Jean-Philbert Nsengimana. I serve as the chairman of the Africa Health Tech Summit. I have been with Africa CDC over the last 5 years, serving as the chief digital advisor. And before that, I served as Minister for Information Technology and Youth in the government of Rwanda. So I found you, John, and then Kunle speaking about what Africa needs. I heard about we need talent, we need investment, we need more data, we need investment, but also the kind of talent we need is not just how you use your ChatGPT or your Claude, is enterprise talent, enterprise knowledge. I, as a business operator, small business owner, I constantly feel under pressure because I feel like I'm not using AI the best way I could. And I know it's the competitive tool that everyone is going to be using. Now, in the context of healthcare, the world's medical knowledge doubles every 78 days. The entire world medical knowledge. If you see the number of papers that are published, the number of drugs entering the market, the number of new processes, every 78 days. There is no way a human doctor can wrap their minds around every new piece of medical knowledge. And there is no way you can use traditional methods to dig into the knowledge and find something of use of it and interest for you. So somehow AI came as a lifesaver, but we need to replace the doctors. I don't think so. What else did digital replace? We have accounting software. Did it replace accountants? No. Did it make the accounting work easier? Yes. Did it make accountants better? Yes. Did it reduce the number of accountants? Yes. But eliminate? No. So I think we need to look at the problem very candidly and recognize what's going to change and prepare for what's going to change, but not be afraid of the change. And I want to say also that, you know, it's a lot to talk about. You've unpacked a lot. And you always realize when you talk about AI, and especially in health, that there is not enough time. So that's why we started the Africa Health Tech Summit. At least, instead of being one session, we will have more than 50 sessions. It's over 3 days and a half, 2 days and a half for the core conference, and a whole day of a pre-conference. And all the sessions are going to touch on AI. But most importantly, John, I'd like us to talk about what we've agreed to do together to make these sessions, awareness, skills, talent development, to make them available on constant basis, not just around the event or during the event, but put in place a program that targets the top decision makers and policy makers and regulators and investors to really provide a space where they can come and, you know, a safe space where they can ask these questions and not just ask the questions and get the answers from us, but get answers from the ecosystem. There is no shortage of answers in our midst. Even money would be there. Some people will have money, but they will need to know where to invest money. And some people will know where to invest money, but they don't have the money. So I want to disclose, we are going to launch it during the summit, that the Africa Health Tech Summit has done a partnership with ICE, the AI Center of Excellence that is chaired by John Kamara. And we want to start a masterclass series. Why is everyone thinking about talent, having in mind the students? Why no one is having in mind the ministers? Do you think they are okay and comfortable and on top of their AI as a minister? I can say no, and I start to be disproven. Why is no one talking about the director generals of these big government agencies? Why is no one talking about the CEOs of large enterprises that work in the private sector, but also supply government? Those are the people who mostly need AI, because the moment they start understanding how AI can be adopted, put to use, made their companies more competitive, more profitable, if they can see how to use AI to make more money, then we know that AI is going to put Africa at an advantage. So we've created that program. It's going to be announced. It's going to be running all year along in all 5 regions of our continent. So stay tuned for that program announcement, and we look forward to seeing some of you, most of you, the organizations that you come from, part of it, and let's at least solve for the one thing that we know we can solve for. We may not solve for the big money to invest in, in a hyperscale type of investments, but we can get our talent ready, and that could be the edge that Africa leads with. Thank you. John.
Can I borrow the last word? But let's call it edge talent. I like, instead of edge compute, edge talent. Huh? So that could be a slogan we all take from here. We're building the next edge talents across Africa for leaders. Okay. Thank you,
Yeah,
Phil. But I'm really excited.
that sounds exciting. Go ahead, John.
I'm really excited to work with, the work that Phil and the African Health Tech Summit has done for years. And I think now just augmented that with knowledge. There's so much information out there, but there's not a lot of knowledge. And the difference between knowledge as information, especially in this age, is you need to curate that knowledge in a way that allows people to consume it so they can then, when they see information, they understand how to discern what makes sense and what doesn't make sense, but also how to plot the graph for both their lives, their organization, and their countries. And this is the goal that enterprise leaders like you people in this room, you need, as the new knowledge that is happening is more important for you, because if you understand this, a lot of you, your last question, Kunle, they will say, yes, African companies compute AI for us because we understand why. And it would also unlock so much other, opportunity in terms of how people can even collaborate, how money also flows into the continent, because the rooms, as we go across different regions of the continent, will be made up of different types of leaders. And you'll also network with other people. So also, like Phil said, the ecosystem, you see what everybody else is doing in the ecosystem and how you can also learn from that. So we're pretty excited as we launch this during the summit that the AI Health Masterclasses across Africa will be live come 2027.
Amazing. And I think those are like very clear, practical solutions to some of the challenges we've discussed. And just kind of summarize, and before I let Philbert, close the session. We talked about a whole range of things, starting from placing the right value on data and on patient care, especially with the use of AI, to talking about controlled evaluation of the models and having safety and privacy by design and in AI for healthcare. And then we also talked about regulation and funding. Where does the funding come from? Who pays for the enhanced benefits of AI in healthcare? And John did extensively talked about that. And also there are a few questions we couldn't get to, but the question of capacity and capacity building or growing talent for AI in healthcare, we also touched on that a bit. I know there are other questions like, existing regulatory sandboxes that we couldn't get to. There are a couple questions about, trusted AI. I know John did talked about explainability and all that, but there's still a whole lot more to learn. And I think that's essentially what John and Philbert was talking about. One of the places to learn across those 50 plus sessions will be at the Africa Health Tech Summit. And I will be there. I'm not sure. I already blocked my calendar since a year ago to be there. So I look forward to seeing some of you on this call there. And this is coming from me. And I'll just yield to Philbert and John. John first for his final parting shots. 30 seconds, John. And then I'll yield to Philbert to close us out. Thank you.
Thank you very much for everyone who was there. I hope you got a little bit of nuggets. As we unpack all these topics, follow us in the masterclasses in your region. But what I want to leave with you is just that the value of knowledge in this new economy that we're entering into, and consistent iterative knowledge cannot be overstated for your career as well as we enter this new intelligence era. Thank you.
All right, so since I'm coming last, let me take this moment to thank everyone who's joined. It's a great audience. We have 120 people online. First of all, I'd like to thank you. Secondly, I'd like to extend a warm invitation. Some people have reached out in the inbox to tell me we will be together in Kigali. Looking forward to seeing each other there. So I'd like to invite everyone to also make sure you don't miss the chance to connect and join us at the Africa Health Tech Summit. It's gonna be the best, the biggest, and the boldest we've seen yet. It's our 5th anniversary, and we'd like to celebrate that moment with all of you. Number 3, I want to reiterate the commitment that John just made about making this program a core part of the Africa Health Tech Summit, but also something that continues between the summit. The summit, we've received many times this feedback that what does it differentiate the summit from being a talk shop? And I think this is exactly what kind of activities and partnerships that will tell the difference between a summit and a talk shop. People meet, they identify the challenges, and we go back, we find solutions to the challenges, and we start rolling out those solutions such that at the next summit we would be there talking about the journey we've made between last year and this year. So the progress we've made, the challenges made, the lessons we've learned, the collaboration we've landed. And that's what we call collaboration. Collaboration with action. That is the thing we're going to lead with. And I'd like to invite everyone to join us on the journey of collaboration. Thank you so much and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.